My name is Brad Trammell, and for this video series, I'm going to answer the most popular question I've been asked for the past few months, which is, what's going to happen to the art world after COVID? I'll be looking at the future of three things: galleries, art schools, and most importantly, artists. I'll be making the case for why galleries and art schools are destined to stratify and collapse, which is why I believe there's no better time than now for artists to exit the debt pyramid, to leave the art world behind and begin building something new together. A global economic downturn can only mean changes for the art world, but I'm not afraid of these changes. I'm actually pretty fucking stoked, and I believe you should be too. So join me for a bloomer perspective on what it means to exit. Chapter 1, Galleries, Accelerated Consolidation. The dominant trend for the past decade in art galleries has been the upward transfer of wealth to an increasingly tiny number of blue chip galleries at the expense of mid-tier galleries, in a way that directly mirrors the general trend of the US economy. Part of the reason mid-tier gallery sales staff and most profitable artists are being gobbled up by blue chips is because the mid-tier business model is really difficult to execute. The first reason for this being that they all pay commercial rent in one of the most expensive cities in America, where their own presence contributes to gentrification. Like bars or clothing stores, art galleries are a selling point for the cultural vitality of a neighborhood, whose landlords eagerly increase prices to maximize profit whenever possible, including increasing rents on the businesses that allow them to increase rents in the first place, until eventually the average rent price is increased high enough for even larger companies to come in, buy out the landlords, knock down the buildings, and erect high-rise condos to extract the maximum monthly profits from the neighborhood. Look no further than Chelsea for the blueprint of this gallery district come real estate nightmare. With the COVID closings, mid-tier galleries are now stuck with the bill for months of empty programming. Without a physical gallery space, their only way to generate sales has been through prepaid art media profiles or by posting their own interview content on social media. The fancy rented commercial buildings that separated mid-tiers from lowly apartment galleries are indefinitely gone, making what used to be mid-tier galleries' biggest asset now their biggest financial liability. This self-inflicted rent problem mirrors an even deeper problem in their luxury goods business model, which is this. A mid-tier gallery might have 15 people on its roster, but they're probably making the majority of their profit from just 2 of those people. Blue chips don't have to poach a mid-tier gallery's entire roster to make them go out of business. Losing just a single profitable artist could cost a mid-tier half their income. So the question becomes, why do artists leave? Well, obviously, if a mid-tier gallery does its job poorly, they give their star artists a reason to leave them for a larger gallery. But if a mid-tier gallery does their job well, they also give their star artists a reason to leave them for a larger gallery. They're fucked either way. If a mid-tier gallery provides their star artist with consistent exhibition opportunities by getting them prepaid art media profiles, by taking them to art fairs, by getting them institutional shows, that's great. Those are the things a mid-tier gallery is supposed to do, because when they do those things well, their artist prices will go up and they'll be able to make more money together per sale. But as those prices rise higher and higher above the average price point for an artist on their roster, the mid-tier gallery's Rolodex has fewer and fewer collectors they can rely on who can afford those higher prices. This puts pressure on mid-tier galleries to go to art fairs to find newer, bigger collectors who can afford their most successful artists' increasingly expensive work, which means the gallery has to pay more art fair applications, travel, and shipping costs to keep up with their star artist's growing price point. You gotta spend money to make money. Through both exterior real estate pressures and interior market pressures, mid-tier galleries are doomed to price themselves out of existence, to self-implode by design. Too many mid-tier galleries permanently closing due to COVID is a bad thing for blue chip galleries. After all, a pyramid is shaped like a triangle because there has to be a wider base to support the top of the structure. Blue chip galleries advertise their market dominance as a result of their connoisseurship, that they're at the top tier of a meritocracy where great artists naturally flow upward from a multitude of smaller spaces. If blue chip galleries can't maintain the pretense of meritocracy because the entire tier below them is gone, then the whole charade is up. The luxury prices they sell work for become self-evidently arbitrary. Blue chip work just costs that much because they say so, not because the artist has any grassroots credibility that gradually necessitated that higher price. In this version of Ponzi scheme capitalism, blue chip galleries need smaller galleries for practical reasons too. Project spaces and mid-tiers do the dirty work of building careers by filtering out artists in their upward climb, so blue chip galleries don't have to. Smaller galleries filter out artists prone to taking too large of risks, artists prone to confrontation, artists prone to bouts of inactivity, artists prone to not being profitable. Also, blue chip galleries know they have a proven commodity by the time they take on an artist for their own roster. In this way, every mid-tier gallery is a kind of unwitting minor league team for the blue chip pro teams, whose exhibition history and sales record provides a tidy scouting report for their superiors to mull over. The fewer mid-tier galleries, the fewer data points blue chip galleries have about artists, the more risky an investment in their work becomes. The problem is, most blue chip galleries treat mid-tier galleries like their competition, rather than an ecologically necessary species below them in the food chain. One of the most interesting developments during the COVID closures has been David Zwirner's City by City Viewing Room series, which, if you're not familiar, is an online-only addition to the Zwirner website, where a handful of exquisitely tasteful mid-tier galleries offer a handful of exquisitely tasteful works for sale through exquisitely tasteful inquiries only, prices and all available for the world to see. It's worth mentioning that David Zwirner previously came out in favor of a progressive price structure for art fair booths relative to gallery sizes. All of this serves as opportunistic brand making for Zwirner to be seen as a more conscientious capitalist, but it does show that at least one blue chip gallery is realizing you can only cut down so many trees in a forest before you have to start propping up the seedlings. The Zwirner Viewing Rooms is the first transparent step towards blue chip galleries entering a formalized business relationship with their mid-tier feeder programs, and what I can imagine can only end in a business outcome similar to when InBev bought up controlling stakes in dozens of microcraft breweries. The model Zwirner is in the beginning stages of formalizing during COVID runs contrary to the Gagosian McDonald's model, where you open a McGagosian franchise in every major city in the world. The hypothetical Zwirner model would mean partially subsidizing dozens of existing galleries, having them keep their names, and in exchange receiving a percentage of sales brokered and preferential access to their artists for future representation. As COVID closures continue, the pressure mid-tier galleries face likely means permanent closure for many, and eventually what are effectively corporate buyouts for a select few. The endgame for this is a fully stratified gallery world with a half dozen blue chip galleries on the top and then a sea of tiny project spaces in people's living rooms on the bottom. In this scenario, the only surviving mid-tier galleries would be those run as vanity projects by people wealthy enough to be collectors, not active businesses that consistently sell artists' work. What I'm talking about isn't a sudden collapse of galleries so much as a future of gradual, suffocating cultural stagnation due to the monopolization of resources. Think of a tree rotting from the inside out until one day it falls over and there's no one there to notice it. Chapter 2. Art Schools. Regional Collapse. The dominant trend for the past decade in art schools has been increased tuition costs. As COVID forces upper education to make a rapid shift over to digital distance learning, I think a lot of people are looking at the cost benefit of attending MFA programs with increased scrutiny. Distance learning takes away the in-person thesis show, the in-person studio visits, and the in-person critiques that MFA programs are built on. And while I think it's entirely possible to structure an individualized at-home research program for art education, that's not what these MFA programs are built to do. Like I said in the No Art School, No Problem report, one of the biggest things art schools offer is socialization. Your ability to learn how you want to exist in the art world based on real-time interactions with your peers. The majority of things you learn in art school don't come from your teachers, but come from your fellow students. And in-person critiques are a great example of this. People think the purpose of critiques is to get one-on-one feedback on your work from your teacher. It's not. that can happen in a Zoom meeting. The purpose of critiques is for you to learn how to critically communicate with other people about their work. That's why 95% of the time, you're the person looking at other people's work instead of presenting your own. And we've all seen that 20-person encounters over Zoom are a fucking awkward nightmare. When you remove social encounters through social distancing, you eliminate the thing that gives art school any value. The art schools hardest hit by COVID closures will be those that heavily rely on student housing for income, those that don't own the property they reside on, and those that have to pay for bloated administrative departments. Seeing schools like SFAI permanently closed during COVID is ominous news for the rest of the art world, because art schools are on the lower end of the debt pyramid. They play a vital role in the functioning of this shitty version of the art economy. The first thing art schools do for the debt pyramid is offer a surplus of young workers willing to accept unpaid or minimum wage jobs. With 80,000 people a year graduating with a BFA, let alone an additional 8,000 people a year graduating with an MFA, art schools provide a consistent excess of people willing to take on whatever entry-level job they can get, which eliminates any bargaining leverage over employers to improve pay or working conditions. Threatening to strike in an art job doesn't carry much weight when the gallery can put your position up on NYFA as unpaid and still get 100 applicants by the end of the day. The other way art schools are a crucial factor in the debt pyramid comes via teachers who are working artists, many of whom have been represented by galleries for decades without the majority of their income ever coming from the galleries they're represented by. Galleries and art schools have a symbiotic relationship. The art schools get to market themselves as being relevant for having represented artists who teach there, while galleries are indirectly subsidized by art schools who provide consistent pay to their artists who also work as teachers. The income working artists make from teaching allows them to pay for their own production, for studios, for storage, to pay their fucking rent, to pay all the things galleries should be paying them for that allow them to continue making art and exhibiting work at galleries. Many of the artists you see working in their 30s, 40s, and 50s wouldn't still be at it without their teaching job. I always say, people who aren't living on money from their parents only have like 10 years from the moment they graduate art school to pursue upward mobility in the art world before they tap out and look for something else to do with their life. Teaching jobs are what keep people going well beyond their initial hustle tap out point so that galleries can actually represent artists who are older than 30, who've built a more in-depth body of work. In this way, teaching income from art schools is one of the few things that keeps talented people in the art world who don't live on money inherited from their parents. If the only people making new work after the age of 30 are artists who are rich enough to be collectors, that is the making for a very shitty art community. What about the cities where the art school is the primary reason an 18-year-old fresh out of high school would ever want to move there? For example, is the Milwaukee art scene big enough to sustain itself without MCAD? Does the Kansas City art scene exist without KCAI? Now that SFAI is gone, what does San Francisco's art future look like without a consistent yearly infusion of hundreds of ambitious young people moving there for the express purpose of going to their art school, then working local art jobs, moving into their neighborhoods for studios, assisting local artists, etc.? Much like the closure of mid-tier galleries, the closure of regional art schools due to COVID only consolidates the power of the largest art schools. The surplus of applications they'll receive as a result of regional art school closures means the largest art schools can either expand to new campus locations and raise tuition, or just stay where they are and still raise tuition. Either way, they're gonna raise tuition. And as the price for a year of undergraduate art school steadily creeps up to $50,000, I think there's gonna be a lot of parents who just flat out discourage their kids from going to art school, leaving the only parents receptive to art school being those who have already paid those types of prices to send their kids to boarding school in the years prior. If you thought art school was an overpriced daycare center for rich douchebags before, wait until you see it in 10 years. Chapter 3, Artists, the perfect time to exit. Chapter 3, Artists, the perfect time to exit. The dominant trend among artists for the past decade has been debt and frustration. As my friend Carly Busta said, future historians may mistakenly name 2016 as the point at which the art world started to come undone. But the dissolution of generational art movements and regional scenes over the past decade, along with the dwindling cohesion of biennial exhibitions, the decline in quality of art media, art fair exhaustion, the consolidation of the blue chip market, and the value spike in gatekeeper befuddling cause style art attests to the fact that art world influence has been post-peak since at least the early 10s. COVID closures have been difficult on artists who largely rely on service industry jobs and perennial freelance gigs to keep themselves afloat. After all, artists are the foundation of the debt pyramid. They're the base on which everything else rests, so it makes sense they would be hit the hardest. And for the past decade, the message to artists has echoed this gritty reality. Keep paying in and you'll eventually get your due. Pay into an undergrad program so you can become socialized in art history, then pay into a grad program to get a career in art, then pay into an apartment in a city so you can be near all the mid-tier gallery action, then pay into a studio so you can pay in to produce your own works for an endless series of unpaid group shows, then pay in to getting another job so you can have the money to continue paying in to this never-ending process. And of course, so you can pay back all the student loans you took out so you could start paying in the first place. At the core of this whole pay-in Ponzi scheme is ultimately artists' dream for pure expression and the recognition that comes from it. And I don't think anyone should give up on this dream, but I do think its allure has blinded us to the realities of the debt pyramid we've come to accept as being the only viable method to achieve those dreams. And I understand how people can believe the debt pyramid is the only way to do it. I did for the majority of my life. After all, the goal of museums is to contain the totality of art history, and every living museum exhibited artist we can think of works with a gallery. Nearly every artist with a gallery has gone to art school. It's easy to look at the debt pyramid and think to yourself, there's no path outside of this. This is the only option I have. And it's not just acceptance of the debt pyramid's shittiness as an inevitability. There is momentum to this process too. When you go to undergrad, you might as well go to grad to make your time worth it. You might as well move to the city to make your grad degree worth it. You might as well get that studio to make your move to the city worth it. Like a good Ponzi scheme, you continually find yourself leveling up in an attempt to pay back your previous round of investment. Part of what I think makes the COVID closures so ripe with potential is that all this momentum has come to a halt. For the past few months and for the indefinite future, there's no physical shows, or openings, or group shows, or museums, no critiques, no schools to go to. And lo and behold, artists are still making art without those institutions. Moving forward, the question becomes, what's to be done when those places reopen? And artists are confronted with the reality that there is no chance for upward mobility, that all of the galleries and schools in the middle that provided the illusion of upward mobility are gone. That we're left with a closed aristocratic society where the only people able to exhibit art are those wealthy enough to collect art, and everyone else is left to permanently pay in to look on from the sidelines. What's left to be done then? Well, I think the only reasonable answer to this question is to exit this art world, to stop paying into the debt pyramid and collectively forge a new path forward. What the downward trajectory of mid-tier galleries and regional art schools show us is that there's no need to sabotage the debt pyramid to bring about something new. It's already set on a course for self-destruction. When I say exit, I'm not talking about creating a struggle session culture where people aren't allowed to go to galleries and have to excommunicate themselves from social life. Unlike institutional critique, exit isn't about negating what we already have, but about creating something new. Think of 1,000 art projects, reading groups, podcasts, group chats, Discord servers, bars, local schools, gallery co-ops, studio visit swaps, all forming a network that gradually renders the work being made through the debt pyramid irrelevant. The debt pyramid needs fresh blood to maintain its position at the forefront of culture. But what if an entire generation of artists stopped paying in? If they cashed out their group show hustle points and create a parallel art world that worked to the benefit of artists rather than collectors, advisors, curators, trustees, or other nefarious middlemen? And people might hear that and think, hey, wait a second, without any government grants in America, doesn't that mean I'll be working a job on the side to support my exit project? And my answer is, That's what we're already doing. That's what the debt pyramid already requires of its participants. 99% of the people in the art world aren't making a living from the art world. They're working a separate job to pay in for a chance to eventually make a living from collectors. Exit is a way of asking, what if 99% of people currently hustling their way up the debt pyramid were paying in to create their own schools instead of attending debt schools? We're paying in to create their own museums that actually represented their interests. We're paying in to create artist-owned cooperative galleries to show each other's work. As artists, we're already working separate jobs to pay in to be part of a debt pyramid that is designed against our interests and continually asks us to go further into debt to support it. What if the thing we were each paying into was aligned with our interests? How different would that art world look? Instead of rehabilitating the current institutions we have, whether they're galleries, museums, schools, whatever, the question becomes, how do you create new organizations that actually do the things we want? For example, we know what sucks about art schools. So if the cost of art schools is an immoral debt trap, how do you create a school that's affordable to everyone? If art schools are designed to underpay teachers and overpay administration, how do you create a school that compensates the people who actually teach students? If art schools don't teach practical knowledge, how do you create a school that teaches students useful information? Exit uses institutional critique as a starting point for the creation of something new, rather than the critical rehabilitation of something we already know doesn't work. Institutional critique is the tough love you give an institution because you want to see them do better. You want them to reform. But as the previous two chapters have shown, what if those institutions' demise seems more likely than them ever structurally changing in any meaningful way? Is a museum comprised of a board of trustees not always going to be comprised of a board of trustees? Is a for-profit art school not always going to be a for-profit art school? Is a gallery financed by wealth criminals not always going to be financed by wealth criminals? Obviously, creating an alternative to the art world can't be done all at once. Exit means creating small, viable alternatives that demonstrate paying into the debt pyramid isn't the only path to expression and recognition. You can't do everything immediately, but the success of one tiny effort can inspire its reproduction by many other people. Setting up a reading group with a dozen of your friends instead of going $100,000 into debt for grad school is a form of exit. Creating a cooperative gallery with other artists instead of pleading for a gallery to represent you for a decade is a form of exit. Creating a weekly skill share among your friends instead of unpaid interning at an artist studio is a form of exit. Anything that removes you from the debt pyramid's hierarchy by creating your own form of cooperation with other artists is an exit. But the first step to exiting comes from within. It doesn't mean leaving New York or stopping making art or cutting social ties or anything like that. The first step to exiting is to stop making art designed for a Ponzi scheme that exploits you. Exit is a re-evaluation of your involvement in art, starting with coming to an understanding of what the fuck you actually want to make work about. You can never truly exit if you're still attempting to accumulate hustle points through market-minded work. Like I mentioned in the Repetition Mindset essay series, most artists have consciously or otherwise internalized the belief that showing at a blue chip gallery is the ultimate form of recognition for their work. And because of this, they alter their work, consciously or otherwise, in ways that they believe will grant them those exhibition opportunities. In the dialectic between expression and recognition, people's desire for recognition often comes to dictate what it is they express. Exit means freeing yourself from the pressures of being recognized by the debt pyramid so you can create the type of art you actually want to make and then build a real community around that rather than spending your life networking in a Ponzi scheme. If the prospect of exiting the debt pyramid sounds intimidating, it's worth remembering what you stand to receive in return, which is that once you exit, you are free to make whatever art you want the rest of your life. Now, I know a lot of people think they're making the work they really want to make, but I don't think they are, because I think the art world would look a lot weirder if they did. All you have to do is look at any meme culture or just open DeviantArt to see how unbelievably tame and repetitious the art world is. As an artist, it's only once you exit from the debt pyramid that you realize the massive pressures placed upon you to recreate the types of art that are desired by collectors. You are free from recreating work by the winners of history. You don't have to make knockoff Georgia O'Keeffe paintings to show with Pace Gallery. You don't have to make knockoff Lewis Morris paintings to show with Simon Lee. You don't have to recreate paintings collectors like but can no longer afford the original versions of. You don't have to recreate the work currently exhibited through blue chip galleries in an attempt to be represented by one. Exit offers a blank slate for expression and recognition. You are free from turning every idea you have into a wall work. I've done so many of these process-based works where it's like I plant a seed and I grow a tree and the tree grows a fruit and then I feed the fruit to my friends for dinner, and then at the end of this long drawn-out process I take the paper plates for my community dinner and I staple them to the canvas to sell. Just grow the damn tree. Exit means just doing the thing you want to do. If it's art, it's art. And if people don't see it that way, that's fine. But there's no need to continue shoehorning projects into wall works for an economy that won't be able to sell those decorative rectangles anyway. Exit means you are free to undergo an art-making process and then let that process take you wherever it will. You are free from repeating yourself for the rest of your life. To satisfy collectors and appeal to blue chip galleries, artists have turned themselves into slow, steady investments. I've seen friends of mine spend years of their lives making the same piece 1,000 times, sometimes in a slightly different color or in a slightly different size. Repetition mindset means creating a surplus of the same work to satisfy wealth criminals' minuscule attention spans. But if you exit from a world dependent on wealth criminals, then you can start or stop a series whenever you want. You can make a new work of art every day. You can make the same work of art every day if that's what you want. Exit frees you to do whatever makes you happy. And then when that stops making you happy, you can do something else. You are free from speaking in nonsense to be taken seriously. Upon exiting, you do not have to speak, write, or think a single thought in International Art English ever again. Don't get me wrong, International Art English does do a lot of things. It increases the length of press releases no one reads, it serves to justify the cost of MFAs, it makes the public intimidated from ever engaging with art, but the one thing it doesn't do is effectively communicate meaning. Exit allows you to say what you mean as clearly as you want. And trust me, you'll be amazed at the number of people who appreciate the opportunity to understand what the fuck you're actually talking about your art. You are free to make work available to whoever you want. If you want to stop depending on wealth criminals, then stop making luxury goods. Art should be affordable. Everyone should have access to view it and own it. Why exclude the people in your life with high prices and reward criminal strangers? If you give people a chance to own your work, they'll take you up on it. And if you can't sell it, gift it to someone. Put your work in the hands of someone who will appreciate it. Hoarding your art to maintain its value for non-existent owners is a fool's errand. Exit sacrifices relationships with wealth criminals to gain a relationship with the public. And there's a lot more of them than there are Count Chocula's. You are free to have a direct relationship with your audience. The degree to which we as artists have outsourced the task of providing ourselves visibility, promotion, curation, and historicization to other middlemen is the degree to which we've sacrificed our autonomy and made ourselves dependent on those middlemen. Exiting from the debt pyramid means gaining the ability to contextualize your own work, to associate with whatever artists you want instead of whatever artists are on the gallery roster or thrown into a group show with you for reasons that are beyond your control. Everyone has the right to be their own spokesperson. The days of too cool for school, cheek-sucking, International Art English talking, aloof nonsense are over. We all have access to each other. We all can see each other. Exit means being a fucking human among your fellow human beings instead of being a caricature of an unapproachable artist from the 70s. You are free from building a CV full of group shows at galleries that won't exist in 5 years. I can't tell you how much time I've wasted networking and flattering curators and sucking up to collectors. That's all time I wish I could get back, because the best partnerships you have are with people you truly enjoy being around. And looking back, all those group shows and things I networked so hard to get in, all those shows I thought were so important in the moment, they're all lost in the sands of time. No one cares. No one remembers my CV. I don't even remember my CV. All you have are the fun memories of hanging out with your friends after the opening and the ways the work you exhibited helped you progress to whatever art you're making today. But the prestige of a group show from 5 years ago does not matter. Exit is the relinquishment of all those hustle points you've built up. And if you want to be humbled about the long-term value of hustle points, open an art forum from a decade ago. Look at those names. Names you probably don't recognize. Names I probably don't recognize. Hundreds upon hundreds of people who had full page, $10,000 advertisements in art forum. And a lot of them probably don't even make work anymore because they burnt themselves out doing as many unpaid group shows as they could. Exit means the end of bad faith networking. The only good reason to make art is because you like making it right now and you truly appreciate the people around you. Speaking of, you are free from competition with your peers. There's only solidarity and the knowledge of the debt pyramid's continued stratification and eventual collapse. I used to feel such a sense of competition with other artists for spots on rosters or to get included in museum shows and all this shit. So much so that I can still smell that same scent of competition when I encounter other artists now who want the same thing I did back then. It is such an enormously freeing relief to let go of all of that, to exit, to leave that behind. When you give up on the debt pyramid, you realize the necessity of paying into the people around you. You realize that each one of us are going to have to create a new path. We're going to have to create new ways of organizing our collective effort to help each other. Once you realize that, then you see that other artists around you are no longer in competition for the same slice of pie, but that you all share a common purpose, which is you are free to make art in relation to the time in which you exist. An artist's job isn't to dutifully go about their lives churning out more and more objects and images in a world that already has enough of that stuff in it for all eternity. An artist's job is to find a pattern in all that static, to present some meaning out of the chaos. Exit is a willful confrontation with the looming existential crisis every artist faces when they get in the studio and wonder, am I making work for an imaginary exhibition in a debt pyramid doomed to collapse? Or am I making work for myself, for my peers, for the time in which I exist? If you confront that crisis head on and you're not happy with the answer, then maybe it's time to exit.